We were still riding the aftertaste of the corporate party. Champagne laughter, borrowed confidence, the kind of glitter that makes even tired relationships look polished for a few hours. The sidewalk was damp from an earlier drizzle, reflecting neon like spilled paint. She walked close enough for strangers to assume we were a story with a happy ending. I let them. I let myself. My wife and I were laughing, holding hands, heading home after a lively corporate party, when suddenly, a message lit up my phone, and in an instant, everything changed. The message didn't arrive like a thunderclap. It arrived like a key turning in a lock you didn't know existed. One vibration, a preview line, a name saved as a single letter, as if whoever typed it wanted to keep it clean and untraceable. And then a sentence that made my mouth go dry before my mind could translate it. You're still with him? Don't make me wait outside again. I'm not a spare. My thumb hovered, stupidly loyal, as if not opening it could keep it from being real. But the phone was already warm in my palm, like it had been waiting for this moment longer than I had. I didn't freeze. I didn't do anything cinematic. I simply stopped because my body refused to keep pretending. The laughter on my face was still there, like paint that hasn't dried, and for a second I felt two versions of myself occupying the same skin. One who believed, one who knew. She noticed my stop only when she had to take an extra step and turn back. Her expression didn't crumble into guilt. It sharpened into assessment, that fast, efficient scan she used when someone at a party said something that could affect her reputation. What? She asked, already impatient. Not worried, not curious, just irritated that I was breaking pace. I held the screen up, not dramatically, just enough that she could see the line. Her eyes flicked, then returned to mine. There it was, not confusion, not shock, but a quick calculation. She made a decision in the space between one streetlight and the next. Oh, she said, and the word was light, almost dismissive, like she'd found a receipt in her purse. The world tilted, not because she'd said, oh, but because she'd said it like a person noticing the weather. That's it. My voice didn't rise. It came out too calm, which felt like betrayal from my own throat. What do you want me to say? She replied, and even that was smooth. She moved closer, not to comfort me, but to control the scene. Her gaze darted to the people passing. Her first instinct wasn't to face what she'd done. It was to manage how it looked. I stared at her, waiting for the lie to arrive, the frantic story, the tearful confusion. She gave me something else instead. A small sigh, like I was being unreasonable. You shouldn't go through my things, she added, as if my phone had just accused her unfairly. It came to my phone, I said. I heard the absurdity and hated it. I hated that I was explaining reality to someone who had already rewritten it. She blinked once, slow. Then someone texted the wrong person. The lie was so thin it was almost insulting, but she offered it anyway, like tossing a napkin to a fire and expecting it to stop. I didn't take it. I let the silence stretch until it stopped being polite. Read it, I said. No, she shook her head, and a strand of hair came loose from whatever careful style she'd worn to the party. The gesture could have looked vulnerable. Didn't. It looked like boredom. I'm not doing this on the street. This, I echoed, and it finally hit me how she could package disaster as if it were an appointment we could reschedule. You mean your affair is inconvenient right now? Her lips pressed together, not in shame, but in restraint. Don't use dramatic words, she said. You always do that. You turn everything into a performance. A performance. I almost laughed because of the nerve of it, because she was the one who had just performed marriage for a room full of colleagues, smiling wide enough to get promoted by association. I stepped closer. Who is he? She tilted her head as if I'd asked her to solve a puzzle she didn't respect. Why does it matter? The question was a slap without sound. Why does it matter? Because it's my life. Because you're my wife. Because we just held hands like it meant something. But my mouth couldn't keep up with the speed of the hurt. It matters, I said, and my voice finally cracked on the last syllable. It matters to me. She looked at me the way she looked at people she was done negotiating with. You're making it bigger than it is. Bigger than it is. The message was still glowing on the screen, that small, cold rectangle insisting it existed. And suddenly the whole night rearranged itself in my head, her disappearing for a quick call, her laughter at jokes that weren't funny, her phone face down like it was sleeping, the way she dragged me into photographs with her arm tight around me like a brand. I didn't realize I was breathing faster until she noticed and used it. "See?" she said, nodding at my face like she'd found evidence. "This is why I don't tell you things. You spiral." There was the second truth of the night. She didn't see my pain as something she'd caused. She saw it as a flaw in my character. I could have begged. I could have shouted. I could have done what 100 stories expect a man to do. Instead, something unfamiliar rose in me. Quiet, focused, almost clinical. "Give me your phone," I said. She laughed once, short, like a bark. "No. If it's nothing, give it to me." Her eyes narrowed. "You don't get to interrogate me." Interrogate, as if fidelity were a court case and I was overstepping procedure. She took a step back and angled her body slightly, the way she did when she wanted to end a conversation without seeming rude. The way she did with anyone who couldn't offer her something. "I'm not doing this," she said, already turning. "We're going home." The audacity of "we" landed like poison. She started walking, assuming I'd follow because I always did, because that was the rhythm we'd built. She moves, I adapt. I didn't follow. She made it 5 steps before she realized the absence. She turned, and her expression flashed, just for a second, into something sharper than annoyance. "Are you seriously going to stand there?" she demanded, loud enough that 2 people nearby glanced over. She wanted witnesses. She wanted pressure. She wanted me to feel childish under the streetlights. I walked toward her slowly, not because I was calm, but because I didn't trust myself at speed. "You're not going home," I said. Her eyebrows lifted. "Excuse me?" "Not with me," I corrected, and the correction tasted like metal. "Not tonight." Her face changed then, not into guilt, but into outrage. Like I'd revoked a privilege she assumed was permanent. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not," I said. "I'm being accurate." That was when she did something I didn't expect. She smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, strategically. A smile that belonged in boardrooms, not on sidewalks. "You want to do this?" she said softly. "Right here." "What's the alternative?" I asked. "You'll tell me later? When you've had time to prepare the story you want me to swallow." The smile held. "You're obsessed with being the victim." Victim. The word detonated in my chest. Not because it was true, but because it was her favorite weapon. Rename the wound, and suddenly the person bleeding is the problem. I took my phone, scrolled, and showed her the timestamp. "He says, again." He says he waited outside. "How long has this been going on?" Her eyes flicked to the screen, and something in her posture tightened, like a door clicking shut. She inhaled, slow, and when she spoke, her voice had the patient cruelty of someone explaining something obvious to a child. "You're not going to like this," she said. "But you've been difficult lately." I stared at her. "That's your explanation?" "It's not an explanation." She shrugged lightly, as if the stakes were small. "It's context. You've been heavy. Always tense, always serious. It's exhausting. Exhausting." She said it like I was a chore she'd carried long enough to deserve compensation. "And the solution," I said, my throat tightening, "was to betray me." She shrugged again, and I swear I felt something inside me pull away from her for the first time. "I didn't betray you. I needed air. I needed someone who doesn't make everything feel like a trial." I wanted to scream, but even anger felt too generous. My mind was racing, flipping through memories like files, searching for the moment when I could have seen this clearly and refused to be blind. Then, another vibration. My phone buzzed again. Same letter. No name. Just that single, careful initial and a new message that made the sidewalk narrow under my feet. "I'm here. Tell him to stop staring and let you get in the car." I didn't understand it at first. My eyes scanned the street, the parked cars, the shadows between them. My heart didn't leap into melodrama. It sank into recognition. The situation wasn't just confession. It was coordination. I looked at her, and for the first time her composure slipped. Just a fraction, a micro-flinch, too quick to be an accident. She had expected the first message to stay private. She had not expected the second to arrive in front of me. "You invited him here," I said, and the words came out like ice. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence was a signature. I turned my head slowly, scanning. A dark sedan idled across the street, engine humming. The windows were tinted, but I could feel a tension from inside it like heat on skin. The car didn't belong in this neighborhood's curbside chaos. It was too clean, too intentional. Someone inside knew exactly where to wait. My stomach twisted, not because I feared the person in the car, but because of what it meant. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time lapse. This was infrastructure. She watched me register it, and the annoyance returned. Thick, righteous, almost offended. "Don't make a scene," she said through her teeth. "A scene," I repeated, looking from her to the car and back. "You brought your other life to our sidewalk, and I'm the one making a scene." Her eyes hardened. "You're embarrassing me." There it was, her true north. Not remorse, not empathy, not even fear of losing me. Just the terror of losing the version of herself that people admired. I took a breath. It didn't steady me. It simply gave me enough air to speak. "You're going to tell me his name," I said. "Right now." She studied me for a moment, and I watched the calculation grind behind her eyes. She weighed honesty against inconvenience, truth against control. Then she made a different move. She stepped closer and lowered her voice like she was offering intimacy. "If you push this," she whispered, "you're going to regret it. Regret it. Not because it would hurt me, because it would cost her." My hands shook, and I hated that too. I hated every involuntary sign that I still cared. I hated that my body was reacting like she mattered when her words proved she didn't. "Try me," I said, and my voice surprised even me. She leaned back, eyes bright with a cold kind of confidence. "Fine," she said. "You want a name? You want a neat label so you can build a story where you're the hero and I'm the villain." She paused, and I thought for a second she might actually say it. Then she smiled again, that practiced, weaponized curve of her mouth. "No," she said. "You don't get that." And with that, she turned. Not toward home, but toward the idling car across the street, as if my life with her were a coat she could take off when it no longer suited her. She started walking with purpose, heels clicking lightly on wet pavement, and every click felt like punctuation at the end of a sentence I didn't consent to. I followed, not to stop her, but to understand how far she would go with me watching. Halfway across the street, she glanced back, and her gaze didn't say "I'm sorry," said "Watch me." The sedan's passenger door opened as if on cue. And that was the third truth of the night. She wasn't hiding because she was ashamed. She was hiding because it was easier. Now that the hiding was inconvenient, she was ready to show me exactly how replaceable she believed I was. I stood at the curb, the city's reflections trembling on the wet asphalt. My phone still lit in my hand like a small, merciless lantern. Behind the tinted glass, a silhouette shifted, waiting. She stepped closer to the open door. And then she stopped just for a second, long enough to turn and deliver the line that turned my stomach colder than the rain ever could. "You're going to be rational," she said, "because you can't afford not to be." I didn't even know what she meant yet, but I knew, with a clarity that felt like a wound opening cleanly, that whatever came next wasn't only about betrayal. It was about leverage. She didn't get into the car. That detail mattered more than I understood at the time. She left the passenger door open and stood there with one heel on the curb, one foot angled toward the seat, like someone pausing a performance to see if the audience would clap or riot. The engine hummed steadily, confident, patient. Whoever sat inside didn't rush her. That alone told me more than a name ever could. "You see?" she said, gesturing vaguely at the open door without looking at it. "This is what I mean by rational. We don't need chaos." Chaos. Another word she used like a shield, as if what she had built in secret was order, and my reaction was the disruption. I crossed the street slowly. Not to confront the man in the car. He barely registered as a person to me, but to stand directly in front of her. Close enough that she couldn't pretend this was a misunderstanding shouted across distance. "Close the door," I said. She smiled again, but this one slipped. "Don't start giving commands." "I'm not commanding you," I said. "I'm telling you what happens if you want me to hear another word from you." Her eyes flicked to the car, then back to me. A beat passed, then another. Finally, with exaggerated patience, she reached back and closed the door. The click echoed too loudly in the narrow street. The sedan didn't leave. That was the fourth truth. She hadn't dismissed him. She had parked him, like a resource waiting to be reused. "Better?" she asked. "No," I said. "But continue. You were explaining why this is somehow my fault." She exhaled through her nose, annoyed. "I'm explaining why this doesn't have to become a disaster." "For who?" I asked. "For us," she said instantly, reflexively, and the speed of the answer made me almost laugh. She still wanted ownership of the word even as she dismantled it. I leaned against a lamppost because my legs suddenly didn't trust me. Not weakness, overload. My mind was moving too fast, stitching together years of moments I'd dismissed. The way she'd corrected my stories in public, the way my successes became shared but my failures became personal, the way affection had turned conditional without my noticing when the conditions were added. She watched me sit back and mistook it for surrender. "You're smart," she said, softening her voice. "You always prided yourself on being smart. So don't do something impulsive that ruins everything we've built." "We," I repeated again because she kept using that word like it was legally binding. "Yes, we," she said, irritation creeping back in. "My life is tied to yours whether you like it or not. People see us together. My position, my reputation." "There it is," I interrupted. She stopped mid-sentence, eyes narrowing. "There's what?" "That's the part you're protecting," I said. "Not me. Not this. Your position. Your image." She scoffed. "That's unfair." "No," I said quietly. "It's accurate." She folded her arms, defensive now, the patience cracking. "You're acting like I did this to hurt you. Did you consider whether it would?" I asked. She hesitated. "Not long. Just enough." "I considered that you'd survive it," she said. The words hit harder than shouting ever could. Survive it. Like a storm. Like a loss on paper. Like something unpleasant but manageable. She didn't see emotional damage as destruction. Just inconvenience. "And him?" I asked, nodding toward the car without looking. "Does he know he's a survival strategy?" Her jaw tightened. "Don't reduce it." "I'm not reducing anything," I said. "I'm stripping it of the story you wrapped around it." Her phone buzzed in her hand. She looked down without thinking, thumb moving automatically. That reflex, trained, intimate, lit something sharp and cold in my chest. "Don't," I said. She looked up, annoyed. "Don't what?" "Don't answer him while you're standing in front of me," I said. "At least have the decency to keep one reality at a time." She stared at me, then deliberately typed a response. Slow, precise, controlled. She didn't even bother hiding it. "There," she said, slipping the phone into her coat pocket. "Satisfied?" No, but something had shifted. I straightened, pushing off the lamppost. "You said I can't afford to be irrational," I said. "Explain that part." Her eyes sharpened. This was her territory now. Strategy. Consequence. "You think this is just about feelings," she said. "It's not. Your name is tied to mine in places you don't even think about. Contracts. Introductions. People who assume stability because we present it. So I'm a prop," I said. She waved a hand. "Don't dramatize." "I'm not," I said. "I'm identifying my function." She stepped closer, lowering her voice again, as if proximity could reassert control. "If you blow this up, you don't just hurt me. You hurt yourself. You lose access. You lose credibility. People talk." "People already talk," I said. "They just don't tell me." That landed. I saw it in the flicker of her eyes. For the first time, she realized I might not be as isolated as she assumed. "You don't know that," she said. "I know enough," I replied. "Enough to understand why he's waiting instead of leaving." Her lips pressed into a thin line. Silence stretched, heavy and deliberate. The sedan's engine finally cut off. The sudden quiet made the street feel exposed. She broke first. "You're not innocent," she said, sharp now, the mask fully slipping. "You let yourself fade. You stopped being interesting. You stopped challenging me. You became predictable. Predictable." She said it like decay. "So you replaced me," I said. "Efficient." "I didn't replace you," she snapped. "I supplemented." That word. That one did it. I laughed. Not loudly. Not humorously. Came out short and incredulous, like my body rejecting a foreign substance. "Listen to yourself," I said. "You talk about people like assets. Because that's how the world works," she shot back. "You just hate that I understand it better than you." I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time I wasn't searching for the woman I loved. I was observing a stranger whose priorities were finally exposed under direct light. "Here's what you don't understand," I said. "Assets choose where they're invested." She stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I continued evenly, "you don't get to decide how this goes just because you planned it longer." Her expression shifted, anger now unfiltered. "You think you can just walk away?" "I think," I said, "that you built this assuming I'd stay quiet, that I'd absorb it, that I'd prioritize your comfort over my reality." "And won't you?" she challenged. "You always do." The sentence hung between us, heavy with history. I took my phone out again, not to read messages, but to turn the screen off. A small act, but intentional. "No," I said. "Not this time." She stared at me, searching for doubt, for retreat. Finding none, her voice hardened. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," I said, "but it'll be mine." Her phone buzzed again, insistently this time. She didn't look at it. She was watching me, recalculating. "You walk away now," she said slowly, "and things get complicated." "I know," I replied. "That's why you're scared." She laughed sharply. "I'm not scared of you." "I know," I said. "You're scared of losing control." For a moment, I thought she might say something honest, something ugly but true. Instead, she straightened, lifted her chin, and put the mask back on. "Then do what you need to do," she said coldly. "Just don't expect me to wait." "I don't," I said. She turned back toward the car, anger radiating off her like heat. This time, she didn't hesitate. She opened the door and slid into the seat. Before closing it, she looked at me one last time. "You'll regret choosing pride over stability," she said. I stepped back, giving her space she hadn't earned. "And you'll regret assuming those were opposites." The door shut. The engine restarted. The sedan pulled away, smooth and unhurried, as if this were just another stop on a planned route. I stood alone on the wet street, not shattered, not healed, just awake. And for the first time that night, the silence didn't feel like loss. Felt like room. The street didn't rush to fill the space she left behind. No dramatic rain. No sudden noise to cue my reaction. Just the hum of distant traffic and the faint imprint of her presence. Like warmth lingering on a chair after someone stands up. I stayed there longer than necessary, not because I was stuck, but because I wanted to mark the moment precisely, like drawing a line in wet cement before it sets. My phone buzzed again. Not him. Not her. An unfamiliar number. No name. No greeting. "You should leave. She's angry when things don't go her way." I read it twice, then a third time slower. The sentence wasn't threatening. It wasn't apologetic either. It had the careful neutrality of someone who believed they were being helpful while still protecting themselves. I typed back before I could overthink it. "Who is this?" The reply came almost immediately. "Someone who knows how this ends if you stay reasonable." Reasonable. That word again, traveling through the night like a contagion. I didn't respond. I put the phone in my pocket and started walking. Not home. Not anywhere symbolic, just forward. Each step felt like peeling myself out of a layer I'd worn too long. 3 blocks later, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't turn right away. I changed pace instead, slowed deliberately. The steps matched me, controlled, not chasing, testing. I stopped. "So this is the part where you introduce yourself," I said without turning. Silence. Then a voice, not hostile, not apologetic. Calm in a way that felt practiced. "You're calmer than I expected." I turned. He wasn't imposing. That was the first surprise. Average height. Well-dressed without effort. The kind of man who blended in by design. He stood a few feet away, hands visible, posture relaxed like he was there to discuss logistics, not wreckage. "You texted me," I said. "Yes. And followed me. I wanted to see if you were going to do something unpredictable." I laughed quietly. "You'll be disappointed." "Good," he said. Unpredictable men complicate things. There it was. The same language, different mouth. "So you're the contingency plan," I said. "The one who sends messages while waiting in cars." He didn't flinch. "I'm the one who doesn't pretend this is romantic." I studied him, searching for arrogance. I found none. What I found was alignment, with her, not with me. "You know she's married," I said. He nodded. "She prefers the word attached." I exhaled slowly. "Of course she does. She told me you were introspective," he continued. "Prone to internal storms. She said tonight might be difficult." "She planned for me," I said. "She plans for outcomes," he corrected. "People are variables." The confirmation was oddly grounding. Hearing my suspicions spoken aloud stripped them of their power. "What do you want?" I asked. He considered that. "I want to avoid escalation. She gets volatile when she feels cornered. You walking away cleanly is the least disruptive result." "For you," I said. "For everyone," he replied evenly. "Including you." I stepped closer. Not aggressively, curiously. "You talk like you're doing me a favor." "I am," he said without hesitation. "You don't want to be in the blast radius." I smiled, thin and tired. "You think I don't already know that?" He watched me for a moment, then nodded once, like I'd passed a test. "Fair." We stood there, 2 men connected by the same woman for entirely different reasons. Neither of us pretending this was about affection. "You should know something," he said finally. "She doesn't leave things unfinished." "I've noticed," I said. "If you push for clarity, apologies, closure, she'll give you something polished and hollow. Enough to slow you down. Not enough to tell you the truth." "And the truth is?" I asked. He hesitated. "Just a fraction. That she didn't fall into this. She designed it." The words settled heavily but cleanly. No drama, just fact. "Why tell me?" I asked. "Because," he said, "you're the first variable she didn't fully account for tonight. And that makes you dangerous to her." I almost laughed again. "I don't feel dangerous." "Neither did the last person who stopped playing their role," he said. That landed differently. My phone buzzed again, this time with her name lighting up the screen like a dare. He glanced at it, then back at me. "That'll be her. I know. She'll say she overreacted, or that you misunderstood, or that this conversation crossed lines." "Which one is your favorite?" I asked. He thought about it. "The one where she positions herself as the injured party." I declined the call. That seemed to surprise him. "You're not going to answer?" "No," I said. "I already know what she needs from me right now." "And what's that?" "To return to my place," I said. "Emotionally, strategically, so she can reset the board." He nodded slowly. "Then you are unpredictable after all." I took a step back, signaling the conversation was done. "Tell her something for me." He raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "That I won't compete," I said. "And I won't negotiate." "What will you do?" I met his eyes steady. "I'll observe." that seemed to unsettle him more than anger would have. We parted without ceremony. He turned down a side street. I continued forward, the city opening up ahead of me like a map I'd never bothered to read before. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone was heavy with missed calls and messages I hadn't read. I didn't need to. Silence had become my first deliberate choice in years. Inside, the apartment felt unfamiliar, like a staged version of my life. Her things were everywhere, carefully placed, intentional, curated. Evidence of occupation without presence. I sat at the kitchen table and did something I hadn't done in a long time. I thought, not about what I felt, about what I knew. She had leverage. Social, professional, emotional. She had rehearsed responses and allies positioned like chess pieces. She had expected me to break or beg or bargain. Instead, I had stepped off the board. And that, I realized, was the real confrontation. Not the street. Not the car. Not even the man who followed me. It was the moment I stopped reacting and started paying attention. Somewhere across the city, she was realizing that too. And she would not like it. Morning arrived without permission. Not sunlight, noise. Messages stacking silently behind a dark screen. The apartment humming with a kind of artificial calm. I woke already alert. Like my body had decided sleep was a luxury I no longer needed. There was no grogginess, no confusion. Just a steady, sharpened awareness that something fundamental had shifted and would not shift back. I didn't check my phone immediately. That alone felt like rebellion. I made coffee slowly, deliberately. Every movement was precise, almost ceremonial, as if I were proving to myself that I still controlled small things. The smell grounded me. The quiet helped. For the first time in years, there was no anticipation of her mood, no calculation about timing my thoughts to fit her attention span. When I finally turned the phone on, it vibrated violently, as if offended by neglect. Her messages came in waves. First concern, then confusion, then irritation, then accusation. You disappeared. This is immature. We need to talk like adults. You're blowing this out of proportion. You owe me a conversation. Oh, another word she loved. I read them without reaction, the way you read old contracts that no longer apply. No apologies. No accountability. Not even curiosity about how I felt. Just urgency about restoring access. There was one final message, sent minutes earlier. If you don't answer me today, you'll force my hand. I stared at that one longer than the rest. Force my hand. As if everything so far hadn't already been deliberate. I took a sip of coffee and let the truth settle fully this time, without resistance. She didn't want resolution. She wanted dominance. The affair wasn't the betrayal that hurt most. This was the assumption that my presence was guaranteed, my silence unacceptable, my autonomy negotiable. I replied with a single sentence. I'm not avoiding you. I'm choosing distance. The response came instantly. Distance is punishment. I almost smiled. No, I typed back. Distance is information. That stopped her. For nearly an hour. When the call finally came, I answered, not because she demanded it, but because I was ready. I didn't brace myself. I didn't rehearse. I just listened to the sound of her breathing on the other end. Sharp and controlled. You think you're being profound, she said. You're being dramatic. I think, I replied calmly, that you're uncomfortable not knowing what I'm thinking. That's because it matters, she snapped. To you, I said, because uncertainty isn't a currency you're used to paying with. Silence. Then a shift in tone, lower, slower, dangerous in its softness. You're making this hostile, she said. It doesn't have to be. You made it hostile when you decided my consent was optional, I said. I'm just naming it. She laughed quietly without humor. You're rewriting history. No, I said. I'm finally reading it without your annotations. That's when she changed tactics completely. I stayed, she said. For years. I didn't have to. The implication was clear. Gratitude as a leash. You didn't stay for me, I replied. You stayed because I made your life easier. Her breath hitched. Just once. That's cruel. It's accurate, I said. and there was no satisfaction in it, just relief. "You think you're superior now?" she asked. "Because you're quiet? Because you're wounded?" "I don't think about superiority anymore," I said. "I think about clarity." She scoffed. "You're acting like I'm a villain." "No," I said. "Villains have conviction. You have appetite." That did it. Her composure snapped. Not into rage, but into contempt. "You were never enough for me," she said coldly. "You plateaued. I outgrew you." There it was. The sentence she'd been holding back, polished and cruel, sharpened for maximum damage. She wanted it to land, wanted to see me collapse under it. I didn't. Instead, something inside me finally aligned. "You didn't outgrow me," I said quietly. "You just stopped needing my patience." That angered her more than denial ever could. "You don't get to define this," she said. "You don't get to walk away clean." "I'm not clean," I said. "I'm done." She went silent again, recalculating. I could almost see it, the mental board resetting, the contingency files opening. "You think this ends without consequences?" she asked. "I think," I replied, "that consequences already started when you underestimated my self-respect." She hung up on me, not dramatically, efficiently. An hour later, the consequences arrived. A mutual contact messaged me, vague but pointed. Then another. Then a third. Stories moving ahead of facts. Narratives forming before truth could keep up. She was working fast. Preemptive. Strategic. I didn't intervene. That was the hardest part. Every instinct screamed to correct, to explain, to defend myself against a version of events designed to make me seem unstable, resentful, reactive. But I recognized the trap. If I entered the noise, I validated her framing. So I stayed quiet. And in that quiet, something unexpected happened. People noticed. Not immediately, not dramatically, but inconsistencies surfaced. Timelines didn't align. Her urgency felt excessive. Her calm felt rehearsed. Silence, it turned out, had weight when it was deliberate. By evening, she called again. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail this time, her voice tightly controlled, almost brittle. "You think you're punishing me," she said. "You're not. You're isolating yourself. And when this blows back on you, don't say I didn't try to protect you." Protect. Another lie she liked to dress as virtue. I deleted the message. That night, alone in the apartment, surrounded by the architecture of a life she'd curated, I finally felt the full emotional impact. Not as chaos, but as grief with edges. Not just for what she did, but for how long I had participated in my own minimization. I sat on the floor, back against the couch, and let it hurt without translating it into strategy. The anger came and went. The sadness stayed longer. Beneath both was something steadier, unfamiliar but solid. Resolve. She thought control was power. She was wrong. Power was choosing not to engage in a game designed to consume you. And tomorrow I would make that choice permanent. I didn't announce my decision. I didn't dramatize it, document it, or deliver it with final speeches. The next morning, I simply began removing myself from the architecture of her control, one quiet action at a time. I started with facts, accounts, access, shared obligations I had once handled out of habit rather than agreement. I separated what was truly mutual from what had been quietly outsourced to me because it benefited her efficiency. Each call I made, each document I reviewed, felt less like loss and more like reclamation. Not revenge. Restoration. She noticed, of course. By noon, she was no longer subtle. "What are you doing? Why are people calling me instead of you? You're sabotaging us." I answered only once. "There is no us to sabotage." That was the last message I sent her. After that, she escalated the only way she knew how, through implication. Through pressure applied indirectly. Through carefully chosen intermediaries who reached out, concerned, confused, just wanting clarity. I listened politely. I said little. I corrected nothing. I let the absence of panic speak for me. Something fascinating happened when I stopped managing her perception. The story stopped sticking. People expected me to defend myself. When I didn't, they began to wonder why. She expected me to fracture under isolation. When I didn't, her urgency started to look like overreach. Control depends on reaction. Deprived of it, it turns brittle. 3 days later, she came home. Not to reconcile, to assess. She stood in the doorway like a visitor evaluating property, eyes moving quickly, registering changes. A few things were missing. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to tell her she was no longer the axis. "So this is real," she said. "Yes," I replied. She laughed softly, but it didn't land. "You're really doing this." "I already did," I said. She stepped inside, heels precise, posture perfect. "You think you've won something." "I don't think in those terms anymore," I said. "That's your language." Her eyes flashed. "You're throwing everything away over pride." "No," I said. I stopped confusing endurance with loyalty. She studied me, searching for instability, for anger she could provoke and weaponize. Finding none unsettled her. "You'll regret this," she said. "Not today. Later. When the dust settles and you realize what you lost." I met her gaze without hostility. What I lost was conditional. That silence, that moment, was the closest she came to honesty. "You won't find someone like me," she said finally. "I know," I replied. "That's the point." She left without another word. No door slamming. No final insult. She didn't need theatrics. She needed to preserve dignity. And I let her have it. That was the last kindness I would offer. The days that followed weren't triumphant. They were quiet, administrative, emotional weather moving through without warning. Some mornings I felt light, almost relieved. Other nights the weight returned. Memories, habits, reflexes that took time to unwind. But something fundamental had changed. I no longer negotiated my worth internally. I started sleeping again. Not perfectly, but honestly. I reconnected with parts of myself I'd sidelined because they didn't serve her pace or preferences. I noticed how often I'd apologized in the past for simply taking up space. That stopped. Weeks later, I learned she was telling people she'd outgrown the marriage, that she'd needed more, that I'd been emotionally unavailable. I didn't correct her. Anyone who knew me well enough knew better. Anyone who didn't wasn't entitled to the truth. That was the final lesson. You don't heal by controlling the narrative. You heal by refusing to live inside a false one. I learned that betrayal doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it's quiet, efficient, dressed as pragmatism. And sometimes the deepest damage isn't the act itself, but the years spent shrinking to accommodate someone else's hunger. If I could offer advice now, real advice, not slogans, it would be this. Pay attention to how someone treats your boundaries when they're inconvenient. Notice whether love feels mutual or transactional. And never confuse being needed with being valued. I didn't emerge untouched, but I emerged intact. And for the first time in a long while, my life felt like it belonged to me. Not because someone chose me, but because I finally chose myself.